Hello, how are you? My name is Aisha, and today I'd like to speak to you about the Rosewood Massacre. This happened in Florida. This happened in 1923, and this is American history. This is the history that they conveniently forget or sweep under the rug. So when you get out there and you protest and maybe things get hot and things get burnt down, they tell you that's not the way to do it. When you know your history and you know American history, you can shoot back at them and tell them, that's exactly the way we do things in America. So you have no right to tell me how to protest. So listen to this story, and then you tell me how you feel about protesting, looting, and shooting, and all this other crap that goes on that's unwanted when you're getting murdered in the streets. So here we go. The Rosewood Massacre was an attack on the predominantly African American town of Rosewood, Florida in 1923 by large groups of white aggressors. The town was entirely destroyed by the end of the violence, and the residents were driven out permanently. The story was mostly forgotten until the 1980s when it was revived and brought to public attention. Oh, some people knew about it. They knew exactly what they did. Rosewood, Florida. Though it was originally settled in 1845 by both black and white people, black codes and Jim Crow laws in the years after the Civil War fostered segregation in Rosewood and much of the South. Employment was provided by pencil factories, but the cedar tree population soon became decimated, and white families moved away in the 1890s and settled in the nearby town of Sumner. By the 1920s, Rosewood's population of about 200 was entirely made up of black citizens, except for one white family that ran the general store there. Fannie Taylor. On January 1st, 1923, in Sumner, Florida, 22-year-old Fannie Taylor had heard screaming by a neighbor. The neighbor found Taylor, or had heard screaming by the neighbor. The neighbor found Taylor covered in bruises and claiming a black man had entered the house and assaulted her. The incident was reported to Sheriff Robert Elias Walker, with Taylor specifying that she had not been raped. Fannie Taylor's husband, James Taylor, a foreman at the local mill, escalated the situation by gathering an angry mob of white citizens to hunt down the culprit. He also called for help from white residents in neighboring counties, among them a group of about 500 Ku Klux Klan members who were in Gainesville for a rally. The white mobs prowled the area, woods, searching for any black man they might find. So not the black man that actually assaulted the lady, or that allegedly assaulted the lady, any person. This is how the devil works. Law enforcement found out that a black prisoner named Jesse Hunter had escaped a chain gang and immediately designated him a suspect. The mobs focused their searches on Hunter, convinced that he was being held by the black residents. Aaron Carrier. Searches were led by dogs to the home of Aaron Carrier in Rosewood. Carrier was the nephew of Sarah Carrier, who did the laundry for Taylor. The horde of white men dragged Carrier out of his house, tied him to a car, and dragged him to Sumner, where he was cut loose and beaten. Sheriff Walker intervened, putting Carrier in his car and driving him to Gainesville, where he was placed under the protective custody of the sheriff there. So, think about how they said hordes of these men. Nobody's really into doing things by themselves or just taking a friend to have their back. They have to have hordes to carry out their violence. Sam Carter. Another mob showed up at the home of blacksmith Sam Carter, torturing him until he admitted that he was hiding Hunter and agreed to take them to the hiding spot. Carter led them into the woods, but when Carter failed to appear, someone in the mob shot him. His body was hung on a tree before the mob moved on. The sheriff's office had attempted and failed to break up white mobs and advised black workers to stay in their places of employment for safety. So the sheriff, being the dude in town that's supposed to protect and serve, thought he had it under control while these white mobs were running rampant around town, hurting random black people. He didn't call. Let me tell you this. They might make it seem like he tried, but he didn't call in anybody. He didn't call cops from the other towns. But he knew what it was. Like, am I going to go against my people? Or am I going to be a lone wolf against my people? The fact is, they're trying to make this sheriff act like he was doing something when he was just there, basically, moving black people around, basically. He had no control over these demons. Sarah Carrier. As many as 25 people, mostly children, were taken refuge in the home of Sarah Carrier when, on the night of January 4th, armed white men surrounded the house in the belief that Jesse Hunter was hiding there. Shots were fired in the ensuing confrontation. Sarah Carrier was shot in the head and died, and her son, Sylvester, was also killed by a gun wound. 2 white attackers were also killed. The gun battle and standoff lasted overnight. It ended when the door was broken down by white attackers. The children inside the house escaped through the back and made their way to safety through the woods, where they hid. Imagine being a child and having to be in this situation, have to run for your lives. But this has been going on for generations by now, so they're kind of accustomed to it. Imagine having to be accustomed to violence on your people just for being. And then fast forward to 2021 and people say, hey, what's the problem? We don't see the problem. Racism. Actually, you're being racism for talking about history. Imagine that. Oh, wait, you don't have to imagine it. Shit's popping off every day. Rosewood violence escalates. News of the standoff at the Carrier house spread, with newspapers inflating the number dead and falsely reporting bands of armed black citizens going on a rampage. Won't they do it? Won't the news just switch it on us? I believe they still do that to us to this day. Even more white men poured into the area, believing that a race war had broken out. So the same people that you have been tormenting from inception of this land, the land that you took it from them, started abusing them, tried to kill them off, couldn't do it. Now you're still torturing them. And now you believe it's a race war because you can't handle your sin. And now you're going to fight to the death for your evil that you've committed. You started it. This is a sick, we're dealing with the sick, I promise you. Some of the first targets of this influx were the churches in Rosewood, which were burned down. Imagine that. Houses were then attacked, first setting fire to them and then shooting people as they escaped from the burning buildings. Lexi Gordon was one of those murdered, taking a gunshot to her face as she hid under her burning house. Gordon had sent her children fleeing when white attackers approached, but suffering from typhoid fever, she stayed behind. Many Rosewood citizens fled to the nearby swamps for safety, spending days hiding in them. Some attempted to leave the swamps but were turned back by men working for the sheriff. Well, don't go out there. Our people are out there trying to murder you, so we'll just keep you in the swamp forever because we can't protect you against our people. James Carrier, brother of Sylvester and son of Sarah, did manage to get out of the swamp and take refuge with the help of a local turpentine factory manager. A white mob found him anyway and forced him to dig a grave for himself before murdering him. So I believe they still haven't found the alleged suspect that brutalized this woman. So they're just taking it out on all the Black people, because when one Black person does something wrong, apparently all of you are to blame. I believe we still have this mentality in our world in 2021. Others found help with white families willing to shelter them. John and William Bryce. Some Black women and children escaped thanks to John and William Bryce, two wealthy brothers who owned a train. Aware of the violence in Rosewood and familiar with the population, the brothers drove their train to the area and invited escapees, though refused to take in Black men, afraid of being attacked by white mobs. So here goes your... People like to say there's no attack. There's always been attack on Black men in this country, always. But I guess you have to attack the strong so then you can push the weaker into submission. Only makes sense when you're dealing with diabolical people. Many of those who fled by train had been hidden in their homes, in the home of the white general store owner, John Wright, and continued to do so throughout the violence. Sheriff Walker helped terrified residents make their way to Wright, who would then arrange escape with the help of the Bryce brothers. Florida's reaction. Florida Governor Kerry Hardy offered to send the National Guard to help, but Sheriff Walker declined the help, believing he had the situation under control. See, this is why earlier in the situation, in the article, when I was saying what I said about this sheriff, he turned down the National Guard. These Black people were being terrorized for days, and he thought he had it under control. So does it seem like he was trying to be the hero and just, regardless of the casualties, or does it seem like he was trying to help? What is it? Because it seems like he's playing both sides. You're letting all these people get killed, yet you're saying you're helping them, yet someone offers to bring the National Guard in and you deny that. You decline that. Weird situation. Mobs begin to disperse after several days, but on January 7th, many returned to finish off the town, burning what little remained of it to the ground, except for the home of John Wright. Remember January 6, 2021? I'm going to keep reminding you guys of that, because these things correlate whether you want them to or not. The crazy mentality of people that believe or that have never been checked, coming out 100 years later, believing that they can still do whatever they want, and people still giving excuses for them. A special grand jury and a special prosecutor were appointed by the governor to investigate the violence. The jury heard the testimonies of nearly 30 witnesses, mostly white, over several days, but claimed to not find enough evidence for prosecution. The surviving citizens of Rosewood did not return, fearful that the horrific bloodshed would recur. I believe somewhere in the Bible, I have to find the verse where it says, the people that do violence to you will never hold themselves accountable. It is a verse in the Bible. The people that do you wrong will be the same people that have to judge over you, and they will never find themselves accountable. That is in the Bible. Of course, I didn't say it correctly. You'll have to find it. I'm trying to still find that verse, but it's in the Bible. Rosewood Massacre Legacy. The story of Rosewood faded away quickly. Most newspapers stopped reporting on it soon after the violence had ceased, and many survivors kept quiet about their experience, even to subsequent family members. So the brushing of under the rug begins. It was in 1982 when Gary Moore, a journalist for the St. Petersburg Times, resurrected the history of Rosewood through a series of articles that gained national attention. The living survivors of the massacre at that point, all in their 80s and 90s, came forward, led by Rosewood descendant Arnett Doctor, and demanded restitution from Florida. The action led to the passing of a bill awarding them $2 million and created an education fund for descendants. The bill also called for an investigation into the matter to clarify the events which Moore took part in. So, about that $2 million. If you watch my other video, I spoke about how they basically give you money in exchange for your life. They used to give slave owners the money for lost wages if their slave died, if they could kill their slaves, the casual killing act, and they could gather money. Now, all these years later, the cops are allowed to kill you, and if they find a bit of fault, they won't fire the cop, won't put the cop in jail, but they'll compensate your family with a little bit of money, because a little bit of money, that should ease your pain, right? One day, I think about this every day, and I will end this. America will have to pay. America will have to atone for their sins one day. And they're playing these games as if we don't know why all this is happening. Why is all this? Why are we talking about race again? You never atone for your sins. You never told your people the correct history. So now they get to run around and say, we don't know what racism is. We don't know what sexism is. We don't know what any of these things are, because we're ignorant, and we're ignorant by choice. So because we're ignorant, now you're the problem for bringing up history. This is getting extremely old, and we're going to continue to be in the same spot because we can't figure it out. I don't really know what this says about the dominant society. I'm losing trust for the dominant society just based on the lies and the lack of showing us our true history. So I hope this helped you know a little bit more about American history. Thank you for listening. Have a good day. Bye.